Spray painting famous monuments, bringing traffic to a halt, chucking soup at world-famous paintings, climate activists aren't afraid of taking radical action. But now, governments are cracking down, threatening to throw climate activists in jail, especially in the UK, where disruptive protests can now get you 10 years behind bars. But we wanted to find out, will anything stop climate activists? Or will they risk everything for the cause? In this video, we're looking at the huge new powers the British government has just given judges and the police to curb protest and punish activists. But how harsh is too harsh? Firstly, we should say it's not just in the UK that there's a crackdown on climate activists, but elsewhere in Europe too. In Germany, the police raided the homes of 7 activists, and they have been using preventative custody, basically going to arrest activists before they take part in a protest. One activist recently got sentenced to 8 months in jail. In Italy, climate activists can now face huge fines. These ones had to pay 30,000 euros, and these ones who coloured the water in Rome's most iconic fountain black might get hit with up to 60,000 euros. But in the UK, jail terms for climate activists can be much heavier than elsewhere. This year, a Just Stop Oil activist got sentenced to 3 years in jail for blocking traffic on a key bridge for 40 hours straight. The judge said that the harsh sentence was intended as a deterrent for others. We went to ask some young people in London whether they think throwing climate activists in jail is justified.
I personally don't think any punishment is really justified. Fines okay, but where exactly are those fines going at the end of the day? You've got to think about that as well. Are the fines just going to go straight to the government? Are they going to do anything about climate change at the end of the day?
They should definitely be at least in prison for like 24 hours or something, so they understand that that's not acceptable.
In prison for 24 hours is one thing, but the UK has just introduced much harsher rules. You can now get up to 10 years in prison for a disruptive protest. We talked to lawyer Alice Hardy in London about how strict punishment for protest is becoming. She's an expert in human rights and protest rights.
It is drastic, but that's a relatively recent trend. Until about 2019, it was pretty unheard of for peaceful protesters to be jailed at all.
Alice Hardy told us that judges are handing down ever harsher sentences. The reason for this is 2 new laws passed by the British government. The first, the Police, Crime, Sentencing and Courts Act 2022. That gave the police more powers to break up protests and introduced a maximum jail term of 10 years for disruptive protest. The second, the Public Order Act, makes many types of what many activists consider to be peaceful protest a crime. For example, being equipped to lock on, i.e. attach yourself to a building or something else in protest, is now illegal in Britain. And tunnelling to disrupt construction work can now get you a jail sentence of up to 3 years. Tunnelling could involve creating a tunnel, helping to create one, or just being in the tunnel. So why is all this happening? Well, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says that the right to demonstrate is not absolute. The rights of the hardworking majority of the population who are disrupted by the protests are just as important. So the tougher penalties are intended to prevent serious disturbances. In our street survey, we only met Londoners who think that long prison sentences are excessive. But a survey across Britain showed that over half of those interviewed support tougher laws. We spoke to Salvatore Paolo De Rosa, who researches climate activism. This is how he describes the British government's actions.
They want to show their toughness against those who break the law. That is also a typical campaign point of conservative political parties. And also, in a kind of populist move, they want to bring the public on their side.
The government cites the cost of the protests as a major problem. The Just Stop Oil protests had cost the British government £14.5 million, around 17 million euros, by the end of the summer. And there have been many unscheduled police operations that hamper normal police work. However, there's also loads of criticism for the laws. For example, the human rights NGO Amnesty International, which says they are deeply authoritarian and are a major blow to human rights. Alice Hardy is also critical of the increasingly heavy penalties.
I think all of these developments are a serious threat to the right to protest, there's no doubt.
But will they deter activists? The protest groups Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion told us that it is not the end of their protests. But individual activists may still wonder, do I really want to risk my freedom for this? Maya is a protester with Just Stop Oil and says the government can't stop her.
I think what would stop me is if I'd suffered an unfortunate event in my personal life, say something happened to my health. But at this point, I can't imagine anything that the state would stop me.
It's not the same for everyone. Laura Baldwin is an activist from Extinction Rebellion, and she told us that as a single mother, she doesn't want to risk jail time.
I took so many actions those 2 weeks leading up to it because I knew that the punishment was a few £100 fine.
The consequences of taking part in protests can be hefty. Fines, damage claims, court cases. Activists like Maya are taking a more strategic approach.
I think people are more like, I'll save my arrest for something that's more impactful and will get more media attention. So it's more like, just using the arrests more carefully because you know that you're going to probably be facing a long court process and potential fines and prison time.
But changing tactics is not the end of the story. Salvatore Paolo De Rosa fears that tougher penalties could lead to parts of protest groups becoming radicalized.
Reducing democratic space pushes the already radicalized fringes of the movement towards even more radical action. At least that's also what history teaches us.
So even though the UK government has given police and judges so much power to punish activists that it's been criticized by human rights organizations, when it comes to bringing attention to the climate crisis, some activists are still willing to risk it all.
Now we want to know your opinion. Should climate activists be punished? Are prison sentences justified? Let us know in the comments.